Professor Buju, many thanks, and many thanks to the organizers for inviting me. And namaste to everyone who is here. I am, as Professor Buju says, a cultural anthropologist, a socio-cultural anthropologist. But what I would like to talk to today is about the sciences as a whole. I count myself as a social scientist, but today many people here are natural scientists. And I also want to talk about the way in which, in the context of the pandemic and also in the context of climate change, we interact particularly with the public and with one another and with policymakers. The context for this is one of the side elements of my job is to act as secretary to the Scottish Parliament's cross-party group on Tibet. And over the last 4 years, we have been looking at the ecological and climate change situation and the population situation in the entire, what is often referred to as third pole area of the Tibetan Plateau, the Himalayas, the Karakoram, all the way up to the Tian Shan Mountains. And this has been an object, obviously, of growing concern for many. And eventually we sought to, at the beginning of this year, set in place a full climate change inquiry at the parliamentary level to look into many of these issues. And as a practical question with reference to the pandemic, we sought to invite people who were coming from all around the world, really, to speak at the parliament and to discuss with members of the parliament the issues that related to this, and really to get a very clear sense of the science and of the natural science and the political science and the social science related to the question of climate change in the third pole region. Now, as all of you know, the pandemic came upon us, and many of these great plans came to nothing. I would like to say there are a few people here, for example, today that we had invited, and there were more here today that we were planning to invite. But the ability to move between countries, the ability to move and see data on the ground became limited by the pandemic. And so I thought I'd reflect very, very quickly on what we learned from that. And the primary thing we learned from that is actually, I'm going to use a single word, which is the word transition. In particular, one of the things we know, because we've been looking at hundreds of scientific papers from all around the world with reference to climate change on the third pole region, is the deep level, not of simple change, but of transition, of moving through multiple states. So, for example, a good example here is if we were having this webinar in 2004, people would be terribly worried. People were terribly worried about the advance of desertification on the Tibetan Plateau. They're now interested by the fact that that desertification seems, by many scientists, to be moving backwards. And a lot of that has relationship to the way in which hydrology works and the way in which permafrost degrades and all of these kinds of shifts and transitions. And these create very, very kind of temporary moments. Now, as far as that's concerned, the pandemic has also presented us with the transitions that are political and that are technological. The political one, obviously, the pandemic has seen a period of time that has been quite fractious on the political front, where cooperation across transitions, again, across borders, has become more and more tense in a whole variety of places and a whole variety of dimensions. I speak here from Britain, and we're just about to go through Brexit, so that's one. Many of you will be aware of others. And that has produced difficulties, particularly when it comes to something as large as the third pole region, because there are so many borders. And international cooperation has become very difficult. However, we also have a technological transition that is Zoom and BlueJeans and Teams and all of this kind of thing that has allowed us to communicate with one another and things like this, which is really, really important and needs to be a transition which becomes sort of semi-permanent so that we can talk to more people than we used to talk to. And we should grasp this opportunity as a scientific community. The final transition which we need to move towards, however, is a transition that crosses the border between the sciences. I am a cultural anthropologist, and that makes me a social scientist, and I work with political scientists and things on those lines. One of the things we very rarely do is work with natural scientists, and natural scientists very rarely work with us. But if we are to look to the problems, particularly of climate change and the impact of on human populations, we as scientists need to transition across that kind of internal border. We need to, if we're natural scientists, we need to learn more about social and political sciences. If we are social and political scientists, we desperately need to learn more about the natural sciences. We cannot understand climate change's impact on population, for example, unless we understand more about hydrology. And those are things that we desperately need to do. And that is why a meeting like this is such a wonderful thing. So I thank the organizers very much for it.